I finished watching your videos and I was really impressed with the breakdown and the steps that a person was taken through in order to understand and be introduced to the concept of non-reactive intelligence, its dynamics, the mechanics, and the exercises and, you know, practical application of it, but also the understanding of where it comes from inside. I think that was a piece that was highlighted really well, is guided by you for a person to slow down. And the thing I liked is that you, through the videos, were like pointing inside a person to where the innate stillness, love, wisdom is inside of a person. And that's really valuable. And I think, again, to have somebody, a person can discover that themselves, and it's made easier when someone facilitates it or is a guide, to say, hey, did you know that there is this, this, and this, like a tour guide, right? And then that makes it easy for a person to go, oh, yeah, I'm going to go revisit that place that I got shown. So that was, yeah, that was really insightful and calming. And
Yeah,
yeah,
you mentioned you were reading Krishnamurti, and I wanted to talk to you about that. How you noticed about observation was his big message, right?
yeah, yeah. So, um, full disclosure, I struggle to sit down and read a lot of material to make my way through books nowadays. Uh, Call it the destruction of my attention span from social media, or what you will. But I find that I, when I want insight into information, like when I came across Krishnamurti, which was introduced to me by social media, and I read a sort of slides of his principles that were numbered, I was like, far out, this is really deep stuff and really aligned with where I am at the moment. And so I managed to interact with uh, Notebook LM, which is a Google language model where you can feed texts into it, and then get it to create a podcast style interview between two people. And those two people on that AI generated podcast will talk about the sources that were uploaded to it and give an introduction to it, or an overview of it, um, as an introduction. So I did that, and yeah, it was really insightful. And he he's very precise in the way that he explains, being the observer, the response or reaction to what's observed becomes less and less. And he states that in that lessening of reaction with tension, reaction with, it should be another way. There's a tension created, and it is a form of inner violence or self violence. And so to be in observance of what is, with less and less uh, movement from the presence of what is, less thinking in response to what is, if you like, then the charge that's generated from, both in the positive and what we would call the positive and negative, becomes less attached, or we become less attached to what is there. And that leaves space for that innate wisdom, that innate love, that innate um, intelligence. But it allows us to travel with a lighter load.
What's interesting is I can't think of one ancient philosophy or religion or indigenous philosophy in anything that I've ever read that does not acknowledge that you have to observe what's outside of your skin,
Mm.
if it's outside of yourself, and then observe how it lands, how your imprints and conditionings respond to outer circumstances. So in non-reactive intelligence, when I was laying out the principles, I didn't invent anything new. I was using my study of Buddhism and Taoism and A Course in Miracles and Gnostic mythology, and trying to find the common thread to help me regulate my own nervous system. And the very first principle that you probably saw it when you went through the lessons was spacious awareness is stronger than reaction. And what that meant is whatever happens outside of us, out in the world that we can't control, there's always a tendency to either try to pull closer to it by grasping, or you have an aversion and you want to push it away. And so what that principle is teaching is that instead of reacting, you go into what they call in some Tibetan Buddhism, like Dzogchen, the spacious mind, and that every event and every thought that goes on in this temporary world is just like a cloud passing through the sky, and the sky is never changed or touched by what goes on in it. And I really loved that idea and didn't know how to make that into a daily practice. So I worked on that for quite a while, and then I started realizing I got all this stuff inside. I've got all these imprints and conditions from childhood that filter my perception of reality and how other people look. I mean, you look at somebody and their lip curls or their eye twitches, and you add to that little event some kind of impression or condition that may not even be accurate, but we're living that. I had that happen today with the neighbor here. I mean, he had a certain look on his face, and it put me back in my childhood of being judged. So I really like that you talked about observation. It's a good way to start this conversation, because I want to bring this into relationship, because that's what you and I are really trying to put that puzzle together, especially for men. Would you agree? I mean, and men struggle the most with relationship nowadays. Well, women do too, but I mean, something has changed, Steve. Something has changed in the psyche of the masculine, and I'd like
Mm.
to just talk about that, because there's a lot more there's a lot more authenticity, I think, in men nowadays, where they're not trying to hide their feelings anymore behind stoicism. They're really trying to say, what the hell happened to me?
Yeah. 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 Thank you for that clarification. I think in my personal experience and the experience that I observe in the men that I know, there is the kind of underpinning is the disowning, the separating from, the cutting off of the emotional experience because of the wounds, the trauma, the unfavorable responses to being emotional, and the adaptation and kind of strategic development of behavior that when I am less emotional, and if I suppress my emotions, I'll be able to generate more safety, more belonging. I'll be more lovable. And this is the catalyst that we get to evolve through. And yes, in relationship, there is going to be no greater opportunity, pressure cooker, mirror, um, uh, purifier of the light being shone on these places where this was tightly held onto as a coping mechanism to make it in this world, to survive, to get by, and the untruth of that the it was it as I say in my therapy work, like these coping mechanisms have built within them an expiry date. They're programmed to expire, and we get to gather an experience through the adoption of those things, through the creation of those things, and we run with them and use them until uh, they don't serve as a expansion way of being. Like we kind of hit the ceiling or hit the perimeter of the sphere, and it's like I can't expand anymore using this adopted way of being. And in relating, yeah, goodness me, I see emotional maturity and emotional intelligence as vital in myself as a man, uh, to have an ever deepening relationship with a partner. And there's a lot of dynamics to that, but at this point, I might hand it back to you to see which way you want to go with it.
Well, I was bringing this up because I don't know if you saw the podcast I did with Elizabeth Ross. Did you see that?
Was it a while ago or was it recent?
Yeah, it was about a month ago. I met her in Sedona, and I was playing music, and we just got into a great conversation about neuroscience and self-regulation and mindfulness, which has been her work for many years. And I said, I'd love to do a podcast with you. And since then, we've been communicating about this coursework that I was motivated to create, especially since I met Diane and then met Elizabeth. Both of them said, you really ought to consider putting this into a video course. And what Elizabeth was stressing to me is that she has a lot of women friends and clients that are in relationship, and they want to be closer to their partners, to the men in their lives, but they're finding there's this kind of disconnect, this lack of coherence, inability to co-regulate. And she said, can you address that? And I said, well, this is what Steve and I are really interested in, and we're trying to talk about that. And and of course, people who follow my podcast stuff with you do compassion keys, which I've had, 2 or 3 sessions with, which were phenomenal to me. And every time it unlocked something when we went through it. And I realized that system that you're doing is helping the nervous system feel grounded, feel heard. And just like when you do a somatic body work, these things seem insignificant, but they have tremendous impacts on our past history and the way our imprints and conditionings are filtering the way we perceive reality. So getting to the point about what Elizabeth was saying is, she said, can you create a course to help men find a way to embrace these things that have been traditionally taboo? Like you're not allowed to express your emotions and your feelings, and that's changed, in our society. And it's kind of sometimes changed a little bit too much, where men are becoming feminized, and that's just not the way to go. There's got to be this balance, and women from who I've talked to, they want the men to be in their masculine frame, but they want gentlemen, you know? And that's been the puzzle for me. If I'm reactive, if I am being jerked around by my conditions and imprints, reaction is always an attraction killer. Wouldn't you agree? I
Yes.
mean, so that's why I stepped out of authentic relating and emotional intelligence and said, what I'm looking for is non-reactive intelligence. How do I create that? How do I embody that? How do you feel in the work you're doing? You're in men's groups, right? How are you working with men or observing that they're doing healing work on this emotional level? Let's start there.
Yeah. Thank you. So I think for what I have observed is that many men that find their way to men's work go through an initial period of um, feeling like I haven't had a place to and a feeling of appropriateness to share my emotions amongst other men, that there is this superficial kind of play that we need to do where we are unable to go too deep. Maybe if we drink a lot of alcohol when we kind of, stumble into a deep and meaningful conversation, maybe that is an exception. But many men are finding when they are in these men's work circles that the structure of many of them in a sharing kind of way with structured agreements to generate safety and trust through transparency is that there is this tremendous feeling of when there is a share from a vulnerable place of being seen. And the extraordinary thing is that firstly, it's being seen by the self, which is this feeling of far out. I didn't realize how much I've been struggling with what I'm carrying. And the acknowledgement of that struggle is self-validating at first. And then to be witnessed, or there to be enough space for a man to unpack what he needs to unpack, to be seen in that. Generally, there's agreements around no fixing, just allowing a man to sit in the entirety of his stuff, produces an effect where once the charge begins to move and flow, the idea being that we are self-responsible beings. We operate best when we are self-responsible and self-sovereign. And that when we have the ability to flow these stuck blocks energetically and emotionally, that it makes space for our own solutions to come through. So tying it back to relationship, you said being reactive is an attraction killer generally. And so it begs the question, if I don't want to be reactive in my relationship with my partner, what do I as a man need to do? And all that's left is self-responsibility. And I think for me, this is a masculine approach. And I don't mean masculine as in only to men, but this exists both within man and woman, that if I notice that I am becoming reactive in my relationship, that's my responsibility to go and sort out. And I've been through the experience in previous relationships where I was not really in that understanding or embodiment. And what it led to is turning my partner into my counselor. So when I wasn't showing up the way I wanted to be showing up, and I was feeling more in a victim place around the challenges of the relationship, I would go into explaining why I am that way and why I think I am. And I'd talk about the past and my childhood and relationship with my parents. And, oh, it's kind of like, it's not my fault, that kind of thing. And so when you speak about that, Elizabeth says that a lot of the people that she works with have this challenge or point of friction or disconnect with their male partner. I think what it comes down to is the work necessary to continue to integrate the emotional self so that it does not stay cut off, fractured off, avoided, labeled as bad, unsafe. Once that occurs, there's a safety. Generally, this is my journey, there's more of a safety felt in the body and the ability for the consciousness to come more into the body. And then that is a felt experience from the woman. She can feel when a man is in his body and when he's not in his body. And that can be oftentimes an invisible point of tension or a unarticulated point of tension or unarticulatable that she will feel a emotional response, an annoyance, a despair, but may not be in full awareness that if he is stuck in a headlocked experience of himself because there's the separation of self through cut off emotions, unaddressed trauma that is being tightly maintained, then it's going to impact the energetic ability to connect, which I have found and would go so far as to say that that's like 50% of the connection and half of total communication. As you and I know, there's mental communication, and when things are being discussed in a relationship, this can be the need to be right. This can be reactiveness. It can be arguing, debating. When there is the body's communication or the body's intelligence, the body's presence is online, then there is more activation of the heart. There is more steadfastness, more centeredness. And I think this is a really pivotal element of being non-reactive, is that requirement for the presence in the body to be online, to act as an anchor point from the anxiety that can come up when these emotional discussions take place, that it can default to a right and a wrong, a blame, aversion, narcissistic tendencies that come up in response for what I call a headlocked experience. When there is that other 50% of presence in the body, then the energetic experience becomes available. The sensitivity to another person's body becomes available. And this is a really critical piece around emotional maturity, is that she has become accustomed by necessity to living in a mental world. And it is not as much of a necessity out there for men to become as competent in the body as she has become in the mind, and that she really needs both from him in order to have her nervous system be able to reach and achieve deep peace.
Tell me about how compassion keys processing could help someone on that level. Okay, so we're naming specifically the the struggle within to face emotional pain, to be able to self-regulate. We're not taught to self-regulate, and this is something that I recently learned in a past relationship, is that you cannot co-regulate unless you've mastered self-regulation. So if you get two people who are dysregulated and they think they're going to get together in a relationship and solve their problem by going through the process of co-regulation, it is going to turn into a disaster. And that's why I created this course. It's a course to teach how to self-regulate. So let's go back to compassion keys, because I had some great experiences from that. And personally, I feel that the NRI came to me because a lot of things were unlocked by working with you 2-3 years ago with
Yeah.
compassion. Remember when I went and did this? I went to Gulf Shores, Alabama, because I was doing some ancestral healing with my male side and my female side, and it was like my male ancestors were saying, "What's wrong? I mean, why did women hate us?" And I had these grandmothers and great grandmothers, and going back through time, and they were saying to me, "We're angry because you can own property and we couldn't, and we were dependent on them." And so this was an ancestral wound that goes back generations. And we can logically say, "Oh, it's no big deal nowadays. Women can have money, they can have property." But we're carrying the impression of our ancestors that are dealing with these things that have never been resolved, and they've got to be resolved through the progeny. And
Mm.
that was what I went into compassion keys with you about it.
Mm.
So let's talk about that.
Yeah, thank you. And I really felt warm in my heart when you were saying that the work that we did together really unlocked the NRI stuff, and the the this is the golden pathway of doing the work, is to clear the charge internally, to clear the distortions internally, to clear where we're hiding from ourselves and where we're hidden, both knowingly and unknowingly, in order to create enough space in our experience for what we're really here to do, to come forth and flourish and have a grounding and a fertile soil. So yeah, thank you for that. That's really nice to hear. Um, you said it, there was a word that stuck out to me with what you said there, and it was impressions, and to impress upon. And we now know the impact of epigenetics, that the impressions from environmental and traumatic life experiences impress onto the genetics and then get passed down. What's interesting, as I have now lived in a different place from where I grew up in Australia, and I see a more expansive view of the ancestors and their impact, is that and I would say this broadly, your culture and my culture share a severance from the ancestor intelligence, influence. And so we've had to kind of stumble across a rocky path around having sustained negative experiences that we can't really make sense of unless we get support, maybe from a dialed in practitioner, or we start to have it seep in. Like, I think there's something going on here, and the ancestors are like knocking on the door going, "Hello," like, as someone in human form, we need you to deal with this. We need you to take responsibility for this. So when you say, tell me about how compassion keys relates to that, well, that's the modality that I use. And what I found so profound about this when I discovered it, and why it feels like it perfectly suited me, is because it takes compassion and it makes it a proactive force of healing and clearing. So the way that it's used with in a session is, it's called self-directed compassion. You said that we don't get taught like how to regulate
Self-regulate.
ourselves. Yeah, and the same sort of thing goes with compassion. Now, compassion is a first degree, or an intimate part of heart technology. And what I mean by that is, it's incredibly potent and close to the source, the spark of source that's inside of us. Maybe we learn how to be compassionate towards others in response to something that's occurred to them that's challenging. But self-directed compassion in a proactive way has an incredible ability to deeply acknowledge difficult things that have happened or are happening to a person in their life. And as the facilitator myself, for my intuitive ability to take it deeper than what somebody may realize they have a conscious awareness of. The incredible thing about it as well is that it's very expansive and able to handle a broad range of experience that comes up. So I have in sessions with people past life trauma that's bleeding over into this life, ancestral stuff that comes up, entity influence and interference and possession and attachment, and lives on other planets even have come up. So it's very colorful and a deep experience to be a human in regards to what sits behind that and within that. And if there are difficult experiences that stay stuck and unacknowledged at a deep level, then there's this feeling of in the body, like, I have a very low tolerance. It feels like I'm already kind of at 90% capacity. And so when situations occur in life that either fill up that 10% or threaten to fill it up, then this is a really prime example of what makes a person reactive and unable to access response or different choices. And what that does to a person is it either makes them withdraw, or they actually begin to manipulate their environment to try to have it not fill up that 10% of limited capacity that they have. And this is like a really interesting piece around that I discovered when I was in a state where I saw myself as a victim. It was a big pill to swallow to understand that I was actually manipulating people, or actually being the one that was being aggressive or violent, both to myself and the other person, because I was not resourced to handle and didn't want to get overwhelmed. And so it necessitated a control mechanism.
You know, I've noticed so much that our society, both of our societies being westernized, it violence, whether it's acted out or it's occurs in the imagination, it's very systemic. And I see it all the time. I see and I look at it as dysregulation. I mean, you see it in road rage, you see it in impatience in people and standing in line, and it has made me think about how the ancients, they knew everything. They really did. When you go read the old source material, the ancient books, there are hints in there that they were teaching and left those threads of knowledge that we still need. And this is about being present. And an interesting thing that you and I have not talked about, but this happened today because you were going through I had been sending you the videos for my course to review and give me before I finally, posted it onto an online platform for sale. And you said something really valuable. I woke up this morning, I saw your text, and you were saying, I mean, this stuff is great, but he said, what happens? You said, what happens when we fail and we react? And my partner takes the brunt of it, and I have to repair because part of me wants to run and the other part wants to collapse and the other part wants to avoid, So I love that you asked me this because, as you know, since we've been friends for, what's it been, 5 years now, we've shared a lot about our past and our struggles with relationships and upbringing as children. And we both journal. I'm assuming you journal a lot, right? I journal. And I was going to address your question in a follow-up series, and I realized when you wrote everything you said to me, I said, I know I got to do it now. So I told you I'm going to work on a bonus video today, which I've worked on all day. And you haven't seen it yet, but I sent it to you. But I wanted to share just a little tidbit for our viewers here of what one of the things I put in there, and it parallels something that you mentioned earlier, and you'll recognize it, but it was about safety. And when you're in a partnership with someone that you care about, I started looking into neuroscience, and for people who don't know my background, I was an online coach for Carezza. If you don't know what Carezza is, you can look up the book Cupid's Poisoned Arrow by Marnia Robinson.
It's very enjoyable to continue expanding this capacity and sort of uprooting and weeding where I feel out of power, out of choice in how I respond or react to that. And the goal is always to get more from reaction into respond, more from I don't have a choice to, oh, now that there's more space inside me, like one or two other options seem to have opened up with regards to how I can respond to a familiar event, which feels more harmonious to me and allows for greater connection with somebody who used to maybe trigger me. So for me, I call this a fundamental in relationships. And when I am looking at relationships, I will ask a person about the longevity of a relationship. Are there good fundamentals there? And for me, this fundamental is, have both people had a discussion that they're both going to be self-responsible for their emotional landscape and emotional load. And this applies to both sexes. Because in these interactions, we will dance with both our masculine and feminine. And it's not exclusively on the man to handle volatile emotion all the time from the woman, and vice versa. And so it's been incredibly imparting of wisdom to me to be with somebody who makes that commitment. And it's kind of like an 80-20 rule. I observe her and my nervous system registers that she is practicing emotional um, containment, not suppression, not avoidance, but when something comes up, I'm gonna hold a space for it, and I'm gonna process the charge myself rather than make that your responsibility. And so when that is done 80% of the time by both people, when an overwhelm comes up in that 20% of the time, there's all this money in the bank of trust and safety that's been generated, where I have so much capacity for empathy, for compassion, for staying present, because I'm like, far out. This person practices emotional maturity 80% of the time. They must be having a real hard time with what comes up. And even if it's directed in the most potent way towards me and it seems like I'm the biggest bad guy, there's more often than not all of this room to be like, you know, I'm so sorry that I'm coming across that way. All of this compassion of like, that must suck. That must suck for you. And I really hear that this is impacting you in a big way. And I'm so much quicker to get to thank you. Like, thank you for telling me that. Like, that's really valuable. And there's some pieces in there that I can take away and take on board. And then I'll, honestly and legitimately um, take that feedback on in a resourceful way rather than you're a naughty boy. And if I need to take that offline in order to grow myself in some way, because there's a place where I'm not present inside myself, that's my responsibility. And I'll do that because I honor the connection and the evolutionary um, uh, bond that it is for both of us.
Yeah, I loved all that, and it's amazing to watch how much you've healed yourself, and you've been working on this, just hammering away at it, and that's what makes our friendship so much fun to discuss these things. And I want to go back to when you brought up about anger, and I had a thought there, and I wanted to share this with the viewers because I'm I'm often surprised that this isn't really common knowledge. It's I call it lasagna layers, and it basically works like this: that whatever is our fundamental core trauma sometimes happen. It could happen it could be another life, or it could be at childbirth, or it could happen uh, as a toddler. There is an initial significant trauma, and we don't know what it is. I mean, we may know what it is, but most of the time we don't know what it is. And the natural instinct for mammals is to scream or cry or emote. We used to talk about emoting a lot. And the body work that I was developing was about to, manipulate the fascia on somebody and have them vocalize and emote to release whatever is there. But anyway, let's go back to this lasagna layer. So the lasagna layer is the core trauma. And then if you're not allowed by your parents or your environment to emote, cry, scream, let it out, then what happens is it gets layered with fear. Fear becomes this unresolved charge. I like how we use the word charge. And if you can't resolve the fear and get to the core trauma, then another layer comes on top of that. And that is where grief becomes. Grief happens, it lands in the body. Fear is more in the mind, but grief settles in the body and the emotions. And if you don't get past that layer, then what comes on top of that is anger. And so you have to realize when you're interacting with people in this world, their anger, their reactivity, their annoyance, their irritation, their rage, this this anger is because it's covering this other stuff, right? And if a person doesn't deal with their anger, on top of that comes depression. And if they can't deal with depression, then they go into addiction. This is the pattern of human society. And Steve's work with compassion keys, my work with non-reactive intelligence is all about how can we break these layers down, get down to the core trauma and feel it. And once it's felt, it's released. And then your relationships have room and space to grow and to become that container that Steve talks about. So I'll let you comment, and then I guess we'll finish up.
If anybody that is listening has done a fast or knows somebody who's done a fast, what happens in the body is that when food stops to, when 3 meals a day or however much it is stops moving through the body's natural intelligence knows that it can spend that energy and those resources on repair and toxic load elimination. Now, as people probably know, this is like a fractal reality. This is like a mandala where the patterns layer out, and so as above, so below. So things replicate things and look and operate in similar ways. The funny thing about that I discovered through this work about the energy body is that it works the same way as the physical body with fasting. So what the physical body will do is when we ingest toxins, in order to hold a level of competent and capable health on a day-to-day basis, it will package little pockets of toxins away in the body until it gets the signal that it's safe to release the toxin out through the skin, through the elimination channels, whatever it might be. The work that you and I do signal the energetic body that it's safe to to release pocketed away traumatic, toxic experiences that have festered at an energetic level. Left unaddressed, there is a little bit that seeps out like nuclear waste radiating out or going into the ocean. This is what I call charge that continuously fills up the body. The only relief that a person gets is in their sleep, and that's the ability to recharge, at least at a spiritual level. But if you look at it like a bank account, and you've got $100 in there every day, when that person opens their eyes, $50 automatically comes out. And so that's before they even get out of bed, right? And then they get up, they see their partner, and all of these ways in which they see themselves as a victim come up, and another $30 comes out. All of a sudden, they're left with $20. Now, they've got to get ready for work to go to a job that they don't like. So another $10 comes out, and then they've got to deal with people at work that they don't like. So all of a sudden, this person walks through the doors at work feeling like any mother effer that comes across my path, I got $0 for them. And so this person goes through life as a soursop and a grumpy person, a person to be avoided, somebody that has no capacity to either give to themselves or to others. And that gets brought into a relationship. It gets brought into a whole bunch of places. And you can start to see then the dynamics of addiction and other coping mechanisms to at least get some kind of alleviation from feeling completely emotionally and energetically bankrupt. The antidote to that, and it's hard to lead a horse to, you can lead a horse to water, but and there may be people listening to this that are like, wow, this explains my partner to a T, or I've now understand the dynamics behind why my partner might be the way they are in challenging or problematic ways to themselves and to the relationship. How do I get them to, to want to look at this stuff? And not by force would be my suggestion. Um, Most oftentimes by example, I find to be the most unarming or disarming way to do it. Nobody wants to be told, like, you're you, yeah, like you're a problem, go sort it out. Now, though, in my life now, when I get that, it's like gold. It's valuable because I have the structures and the foundation in place to be able to do something with that. But when someone's energetically feeling like they've just got very limited capacity, when they drive themselves to absolute, I can't do this anymore in point in their life, which sometimes is popularly known as a midlife crisis. It's a point where the way I've been coping does not work anymore. And they need to get to that point sometimes for people where they've just had an absolute gutful, is a term we use in Australia, an absolute gutful of the way things are, and it forces a change. And this is the divine spark in them going, I need to crack open this um, uh, like accumulation of coping mechanisms and strategic behaviors because it can't contain the truth of who we really are. And that may come from an intense relationship. It may come from a life-threatening crisis or something like that. And that's why I say these coping mechanisms come built in with an expiry date. When that call comes, or if then they're on the less intense end of the spectrum, there are people who are proactive about their wellness development and their evolution, and they enjoy the process. Then that's where this work is so beneficial, because what it does specifically in my field is it, through compassion as the vehicle, it deeply, deeply, deeply goes into, in a safe way, and acknowledges things that have been held as very, very difficult experiences that were overwhelming and got pocketed away in the energetic body. And this happens in family lineages as well. You were talking about this ancestral stuff. At a spiritual level, within the family arc, stuff can get pocketed away when it's overwhelming there and then gets passed down, passed down, passed down. What happens in the presence of such a base level heart technology as compassion is that the awareness and deep acknowledgement of these things that have usually been avoided and pocketed away until it's safe to deal with, when they are viewed directly through the lens of compassion, practical self-directed compassion, it has a wonderfully simple dissolving effect on what has been tightly pocketed away, and there's been negative emanations of charge filling up the body. When something like that gets dissolved and cleared at the root level, the beautiful thing is that no longer is there an emanation filling up the body of charge, giving someone a limited capacity. And now we understand the dynamics of when we address those things that are being carried and taking our energy, and that we feel like we need to keep and stay attached to because it protects us, keeps us safe, maybe for a trade-off of playing small or giving less of ourselves. Then when that stuff's cleared at a root level, there is a feeling of spaciousness inside. And a lot of people I work with, when I check in on them after our session, they say two things. I feel much lighter, and I have this feeling of spaciousness inside me. and this is what you talk about in your non-reactive intelligence, is that it's not about installing love, peace, all of these beautiful virtues into our system. It's that there is a lasagna on top of those, and that when that lasagna is not there, we find that naturally there has been a love current flowing through us that actually foundationally sustains us and who we are at our core level, that finally has the space to actually like install itself as to more of our natural way of being, because the personality is no longer saturating the space with, no, no, God, I've got this. I've adapted all the ways to get by and to drive the ship. And God, in giving us, or the universe, or, prime source, creator, whatever you want to say, allows us to have the experience of forgetting what we really are.
There's a line in A Course in Miracles that right at the beginning that says the Course aims not to teach the meaning of love, but to remove the blocks to the awareness of love's presence.
And that's our responsibility. And the journey for me from victimhood as a learned system to self-responsibility and self-sovereignty, which is where it's a really good ground to anchor a lot of these mature masculine attributes into, like, this self-sovereignty piece. One that's become clear to me in the last couple of years is when something needs to be done, it's up to me to do it. And prior to that, it was kind of like, oh, that's someone else's job to do, or someone else can do that. It's like, no, no, that's for me to do. And that has been quite liberating and empowering. But yeah, you're quite right. So
are you still taking on clients for Compassion Keys? Can people get in touch with you still for that?
absolutely. I love this. I love this work.
We'll put a link to get in touch with you. And for me, I'm not doing any private sessions or anything like that, but I am creating video courses for sale. And my first one is going to be on sale for 65 US dollars. And I'll put the link if you want to order that. It's over 2 hours of video teaching and a workbook about relational non-reactive intelligence, how to bring this into relationship so you can have more harmony and more self-regulated coherence. That's the work I'm doing out here in Sedona, Arizona.
Yeah, I recommend it. It's a beautiful, it so beautifully holds a person as someone who's taken themselves through it. It is so supportive because it can be tricky to slow down enough to look at some of these deeper things. And it feels really well facilitated in that respect. So yeah, recommend it. My Instagram, if people want to reach out to me, is steve.heart, as in the heart organ, .liberation, steve.heart.liberation. But yeah, we'll put the details underneath.
I'm on Instagram now, so I gotta friend you there. So.
Yeah. Excellent. I look forward to it.
Thank you for this talk, and we're going to say goodbye here, and we'll see you next time. So bless you.
Thank you.